I'm going to say this at the very beginning of the video so that there's no questions at any point. Yes, I am wearing a turtleneck shirt under a turtleneck sweater. And that is because we've now reached the cold season in Canada and I care like 2% about style and 98% about being cozy while I sit on the couch all day. Hi everyone, Rosie here. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my first official Nonfiction November video of the year. I am so excited. I'm actually filming this a bit in advance, so it's not even November yet, and I feel like I'm cheating by starting, but I'm so excited and I want to choose my next book, so it is time to film this video. It is, of course, a try a chapter tag. Is this even a tag? Really? I don't know. I think it's just a video format at this point. I've done 2 in the past, I think. I've done at least 1, possibly 2 try chapters before, which I will link up there or wherever or down below. In this instance, I'm doing a non-fiction specific try chapter. I have 5 chunky non-fiction books that I want to read one of. I definitely don't want to read all of these, although they are all interesting, but I figured I'm going to try a chapter from each one, and then I'll pick my next probably month and a half worth of bedtime reading. I don't think I'm going to do a big introduction of any of these books before I start. I'm just going to mention the title and then I'll read a chapter and let you know what I think. The first one I'm going to try is Casanova by, I think it's Laurence Bergreen. I'm filming on my phone so I can't look at the list. It's also on my phone. This is a biography, I think, about Casanova, who I know very little about. Famous, like, can I say famous fuckboy of history? Because that's the impression I got. I know I watched the movie, God, probably 10 or 15 years ago now, but I remember nothing. I feel like maybe he was having sex with a nun. That's about all I remember. Also, he wore like really old school sunglasses. But I think it's sort of like 1400s. I want to say Italy. I don't know. Let's read the first chapter and I'll let you know what I think about the book and if I'm going to learn a lot more about Casanova very soon. I read the preface and the first chapter because with nonfiction, I always feel like the preface isn't really the true style of the book or the true pacing of the book, and you've got to read the first chapter as well. So I read both, and I have to say I am much more interested in learning about Casanova now. So I have a couple quotes that I highlighted in the preface, which, one, apparently he was a Venetian adventurer, spy, duelist, gambler, escape artist, and author of nearly 100 novels, poems, and treatises. Cool! I do want to learn more about this. The first chapter was good. It was about like a very brief overview of his parents' history and who they were, and then about his early childhood and his sort of, I mean, we would call them his preteen years, but he spent part of them in university, so it's kind of weird. Basically up until the time he was about 15, and how he was educated, and the people he knew, and the sort of situations he was in. It is really interesting. It is definitely going to be, I think, a slow book, but all of these are supposed to be slow books, so that's to be expected, I guess. I think regardless of whether I read it now or in the future, this is a book I want to read. It is one I want to keep on my TBR. It is still very interesting to me. Yeah, I do want to learn more about Casanova, I guess. Definitely a strong contender. If none of the others feel good, then this one I think would be a very solid book to read. I think I'm going to tackle the first chapter of the most intimidating book on this list next, and that is The Gene by Siddhartha Mukherjee. I feel like this book is really popular and really famous. I think I'm remembering that correctly. I don't really know what it's about other than the gene. I think it's called like The Gene, an Intimate History. So I assume it's going to be about science of genes, but beyond that, I don't really know, so I guess I will read the first chapter and let you know what I think. Good news, I guess. The Gene wasn't nearly as intimidating as I thought it was going to be. I read, again, the prologue and the first chapter because the prologue was more about, like, I think why the author was interested in this topic and also, like, what he was going to do in the book, and then the first chapter was where it really started, and it really started very basic. I mean, we start a little bit with Mendeleev, or whatever his name is, you know, the guy with the peas, and like his early training, and then we jump back in time to like, what did the ancient Greeks think about this? How right were they? How wrong were they? How were things evolving through the Middle Ages? And it was all pretty approachable, pretty accessible. I mean, it's a very long book. It would take me a long time to read, but it does seem interesting, and it does seem like it would be enjoyable to read. That, as I said, was off to a better start than I expected, honestly. I thought it was going to be more of a slog for some reason. I have 3 more books to try, however, so I think next up I'm going to try Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen. I think this is like an autobiography or maybe a memoir. I'm not sure which it is exactly, but it should be interesting. I'm not a huge Springsteen fan. I've certainly not like listened to all of his albums or anything like that, but I definitely enjoy his work. I feel like his writing will probably be really interesting, and I would love to learn more about him. And without further ado, let's read the first chapter. I have to say, after 2 books where the first chapters were both like 20 to 30 minutes of reading, a book with a 4-minute long chapter is incredibly refreshing. And even from just the first chapter, I can tell that Springsteen's amazing way with words is going to come across on the page, and that this is going to be a beautiful book to read. From what the preface or prologue or whatever it was called in this one and the first chapter seemed to indicate, I think this is going to be sort of how Springsteen became Springsteen, and then what his experience was, in the sense of obviously he was born Bruce Springsteen, but how did he become the Bruce Springsteen that we know? How did he become the rock icon that he is, and what has that been like for him? I don't have any sense of ranking between these 3 books yet. All of them are definitely staying on my TBR, whether I read them now or not. All of them are definitely books I want to read. I think this is reminding me that I need to get back in the habit of having a book that I spend a long time reading. I think Booktube has sort of pushed me to not pick up these long, potentially slower books in favor of shorter, faster books that I can finish in a week sort of thing. But I need to remember that there's nothing wrong with taking a month or 2 months to read a book. And I really enjoy having something a bit more slow-paced and long-term on the go, where I can pick it up while I'm falling asleep. I can read it for as long as I want until I fall asleep. It's always there. I don't need to think about it so much, which is weird. Some of these are, they're all nonfiction, but I'm reading it just for the pleasure of reading, and that's a really important thing to have. As I said, no matter what one I pick to read in the immediate future, I think, at least of the 3 I've tried so far, all of these are going to get read in the coming months, and I'm really excited about it. I think I'm going to go back to my last sciencey book, or the second sciencey book for my first chapter, and that is Chasing the Sun by, I think, Richard Cohen. I don't really, again, know what this is about. It's about the sun, the star that dominates our lives, something like that. The cover will be up beside me, and you guys can have a look at what the subtitle is. That should be cool. It sounds very different, and I have not read anything by this author, and I don't think I've ever even heard of anything he's written, so I don't know how I picked this book up, but let's see if I want to read it. I feel like I'm on such a roll today. Chasing the Sun started off delightfully. I didn't actually read the chapter that was technically labeled chapter 1, but I read like a foreword and then another 10-page excerpt about the author's experience climbing Mount Fuji overnight to like see the sunrise from the summit, and oh my goodness. Mount Fuji has never particularly interested me before. Like, it looks cool. If I'm ever in Japan, obviously I would go, but now I'm like, oh my goodness. This sounds like the coolest thing ever. I need to do this hike. And I think that's such a cool thing when a book can do that, when a book can make you feel like, wow, this thing I had never thought about before is now so fascinating. And I think that says some really promising things about the author's writing. It also doesn't seem like it's as scientific as I expected. I think there's definitely going to be some science and like astronomy and that sort of stuff in it, but it's equally about the role of the sun in our culture, in our art, everything like that, I think. And yes, again, even if I don't read this right now, I need to read this book. I think it sounds so interesting. And I almost forgot to mention, but preface, forward, whatever it was called, started off with like the definition of the sun from some encyclopedia or something. I was kind of like, really? Is that where we're starting? And then the next sentence was like, that's all very accurate, but then referenced a P.G. Wodehouse quote, and I was like, okay, I'm convinced. I'm here for it. Maybe I'm falling for name dropping, but the author also mentions discussing this book with Richard Holmes, who wrote The Age of Wonder, which I very much enjoyed earlier this year. So like, That's promising as well. I don't know. I wasn't expecting to feel as excited about this book as I am, but having read a little bit of it, I'm seriously like, wow, another really strong contender. Like, each one of these, I read it and go, oh, surely this is going to be the one I want to read. This is so interesting. This is so cool. This is going to be, but then I'm like, well, but all of them. So I guess I've got lots of good bedtime reading coming up. Before we decide though, I do have one more book to try, and that is A Distant Mirror, The Calamitous 14th Century. I think that's the title. Again, the cover will be up here. It's by Barbara Tuchman. This is, I think, as I said, about the 14th century, the history that was going on then. I assume in Europe, but I'm not positive. And it's kind of cool because it's an older history book. So of course it's a history book about fairly distant history, obviously, but it was written in the 1970s. I think it came out in like 1978. And I don't know if I've ever read a history book that was written that long ago. So that's got me really intrigued. Also, several of you guys mentioned on my TBR that you had read it and really enjoyed it or thought it was really good. I won't lie, this is the one that I've got a bit of a bias. I'm like, this is the one that I think I'm gonna pick, but we'll see what the first chapter is like and if I still feel that way. All right, I've read my final first chapter, and I have to say, I'm no closer to coming to a decision. Once again, I think this was the case for literally all of these books, but there was a preface and then I read the first chapter as well. I have to say there were some things in the intro, forward, whatever it was called, that made me go like, whoa. Because, as I said, this was written in the 1970s, and there's this one passage in particular that I highlighted and I want to read. If our last decade or two of collapsing assumptions has been a period of unusual discomfort, it is reassuring to know that the human species has lived through worse before. And with that sort of approach to the book, honestly, it makes it even more interesting because collapsing assumptions, uncertainty, yes, we're there. It is plaguing my anxiety, and it's not great, so I wonder if this might be interesting. The first chapter of the book itself was also good. I mean, very much history writing. Not as academic as The Witch, which I read in October. I will link my wrap-up up here where I talk about that. So not quite that academic, like it's not referring to other people's work explicitly and stuff, but it's definitely very thorough and interesting. So far, it's mostly focused on sort of larger scale social trends, looking largely at France so far. I'm not sure if it's going to get more broad or not, but I think it's basically going to look at the span of the 14th century and what were the forces at work going in, what were the events that were climactic within that century. Of course, the plague is a big one. Then what consequences came out of all that, what was different at the end. It does seem really interesting. It seems fascinating. I'm enjoying the writing. As with all of these, it's going to be a slow read. It's going to take me a long time to get through, but that's not a bad thing, and it does seem very cool. And now I really thought I was going to get to the end of reading these 5 chapters and be like, okay, it's really obvious which one I want to read, but it is not at all. I do not know which of these I want to read right away. So I'm thinking I might go upstairs and ask Bear. Okay, I have recruited assistants. Bear, I have just read first chapters about Casanova, Genes as in Gene. I always get those letters confused. Bruce Springsteen, the sun, and the 14th century. Which topic should I read about?
Genes.
Okay. All right, there's the verdict. I'm going to be reading The Gene, and I have to say I did have a moment of, as he was saying that, I was like, oh, that's not the one I would have chosen, but that's okay, because I'm going to read all of these, so there's no rush. Yeah, this is fun. I'm actually really looking forward to it. The writing style was a lot more approachable than I expected, which I should have expected. This is a hugely popular book, and really unapproachable books are usually not very popular. But this has been really fun. It's also taken me all afternoon, I think, because nonfiction books tend to have pretty long chapters, and each of these has taken me like half an hour to an hour to get through the beginning bits and first chapters, so like it's been a commitment, but what better way to spend a rainy afternoon? And now I know what my next big book is going to be. Let me know down below, which of these would you have chosen? And if you've read any of them, let me know what you think about them. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like down below. If you would like to see more of my videos, please hit subscribe, and thank you for watching!